I watched my daughter through the diner window, her ponytail swinging as she refilled coffees along the counter. 22 years old, third year of nursing at Dalhousie, and she still worked the Friday and Saturday night shifts at Peggy's, this little breakfast all-day place on Gottingen Street in Halifax. The November wind had already turned mean. I stood on the sidewalk longer than I needed to, just watching her move through the tables with that same unhurried ease she'd had since she was small. Her name was Jess, my daughter, my whole reason for most of the decisions I'd made in the last 18 years. Her mother, Lynn, passed when Jess was 4. Ovarian cancer, fast and brutal. So it had been the two of us since then, in our 3-bedroom semi in Dartmouth, figuring things out together. My phone buzzed, my brother Dennis's name on the screen. Hey, you're still coming for Thanksgiving, right? Sunday at the house. Of course. Jess and I will be there around 2. There was a pause. Longer than it needed to be. About that. Cheryl was thinking it might be a bit more of a, adult evening this year. Clients and colleagues, that sort of thing. She's been planning this for weeks. I stopped walking. My hand tightened on the phone. Jess is 22, Dennis. She's not a child. I know. It's just, she works worried it'll come up. The Morrisons are coming and they just sold their Annapolis Valley property for $2 million. Cheryl wants the conversation to stay a certain way. I looked back through the window. Jess was laughing at something an old man in a red flannel coat had said. She had Lynn's laugh, the kind that started in her eyes before it ever reached her mouth. We'll be there at 2, I said, and I hung up. That night I didn't say anything to her about the call. She was excited. She'd already bought a bottle of Tidal Bay from the NSLC to bring as a hostess gift, a Nova Scotia White that cost her about $40. Real money on a server's wage and part-time placement stipend. She held it up when she got home, still in the paper bag. I thought Aunt Cheryl might like this better than flowers. She mentioned once she was trying to go more local. She definitely will, I said, and hated myself a little for it. Sunday we drove out to Dennis and Cheryl's place in Hammonds Plains, a 5-bedroom new build on a cul-de-sac where every house looked slightly different but all cost the same amount. Dennis had done well with his commercial insurance brokerage. Cheryl's family had money going back 2 generations in real estate development, and she never exactly forgot it. We arrived at 1:30. I'd planned it that way. Jess wanted to help set up, said it felt rude to show up right at mealtime. The driveway already had 6 cars in it, an Audi Q7, a Range Rover, a BMW. I parked my 8-year-old F-150 along the curb. We're early, Jess said, pulling the wine from the back seat. That's good, right? Maybe we can help with something. She was wearing her good blouse, the navy one she kept for clinical presentations. She'd done her hair. She looked lovely. Cheryl answered the door before we could ring the bell. She was in a wrap dress the color of burgundy, her hair blown out, a glass of white already in hand. Her smile was practiced in a way that had always reminded me of a hotel front desk. Dennis is on a call. She looked at Jess, just briefly, the way you clock something, and immediately file it away as unimportant. Jess, honey, so you smell quite strongly of the diner. You know how it clings. I showered before we left, Jess said. She wasn't defensive, just matter of fact. I'm sure you did. Cheryl's voice had that particular quality, smooth on the surface and something much colder underneath. It's the fryer oil. It gets into everything, doesn't it? Look, the Morrisons are already here and they have Terry's allergies to think about. Why don't you wait in the mudroom just for a few minutes? There's a bench in there and I'll bring you something to drink, just until everyone's settled. Jess looked at me. There was something in her eyes that she was working to keep out of her face. It's fine, Dad, she said quietly. I'll wait. No, I started. Dad, please. I don't want to make it awkward. She walked past Cheryl into the mudroom, a narrow room off the side entrance where people left their boots and jackets. I heard the bench creak as she sat down. Cheryl smiled at me. Dennis is in the study. Come in, get a drink. I should have turned around right then. I know that now. I've known it since the moment I chose not to. But I walked in. I told myself I'd talk to Dennis, that I'd fix it from the inside, that 2 minutes and I'd have her out of that room and sitting at the table with everyone else. I told myself a lot of things. Dennis was in his study on a call, laughing at something about Q4 numbers. He waved at me, held up one finger. I stood in the doorway looking at the photos on his wall. Dennis and Cheryl at some charity auction in the city, her in a floor-length gown. Dennis at his brother-in-law's camp in Baddeck, holding up a striped base. No photos of Jess, no photos of Lynn. No photos of our parents, who'd both passed within 3 years of each other, mom first then dad, like one couldn't figure out what to do without the other. He hung up, slapped my shoulder. Mike. Good. I'm glad you're here. Listen, about the mudroom thing, Cheryl just wants the first hour to go smoothly with the Morrisons. Once they're settled, Jess can come in and it'll be fine. She's your niece. I know that. She drove out here. She brought wine. Dennis ran a hand over the back of his neck. The Morrisons are looking at one of Cheryl's developments in Elmsdale. There's a lot riding on today. You know how Cheryl is when she's entertaining. I know how Cheryl is when she's entertaining. I know exactly how she is. Where are your kids? Upstairs getting ready. Cheryl hired someone to do their hair for family photos. Family photos. By the tree. Yeah, it'll be nice. I walked out. Dennis called after me, but I kept moving. Through the living room, where strangers held glasses of something sparkling and talked about the new proposed highway bypass. Through the kitchen, where a woman I didn't know was arranging a charcuterie board with the kind of focus usually reserved for surgery. Out to the side entrance, Jess was on the bench in the mudroom. Someone had set up a little folding TV tray beside her with a glass of sparkling water and a side plate with 3 crackers on it. 3. She had her phone in her hand, but she wasn't looking at it. Hey, Dad. She tried to smile. I sat down next to her on the bench. It was the kind built for holding boots, not people. How long has this been happening? She looked at the floor. Aunt Cheryl's never been exactly warm. Jess. She picked at a thread on her sleeve. Remember last Easter when she introduced me to their neighbors and said she said I was Dennis's niece who was going to school. Just left out nursing. Like school meant I was doing arts or something she couldn't place. I remembered. I'd told myself it was an oversight. At Christmas 2 years ago, she gave Kira and Max gift cards to Holt Renfrew. She gave me a bath set from Shoppers, the kind they put by the checkout. I saw the receipt in the bag by mistake. $11. My hands were flat on my thighs. And last summer when you had that work thing and I drove out here myself for the long weekend, she introduced me to the people at the dock as, she called me the diner girl. Not your niece, the diner girl. Each one landed. Why didn't you say anything? Because Uncle Dennis is your only family besides me, and I didn't want to be the reason you stopped talking to him. I put my arm around her. She leaned into it the way she used to when she was small and the world was too loud. You are worth 10 of every person in that house, I said. You're working 20 hours a week while doing clinical rotations. You wake up at 5:30 on placement days. You've held strangers' hands in emergency wards. There is nothing, not one thing, about your life that you need to be ashamed of. I know that, she said softly. I just wish they knew it too. Finish your crackers. Then we're going in. Dad, no, we're going in, Jess, and we're sitting at that table, because we have every right to be there, and I'm done pretending otherwise. We waited another few minutes. Through the small window above the bench, I could see people moving through the living room, could hear music and the particular hollow laughter of people performing for each other. Eventually, Cheryl came to the mudroom door. Everyone's seated. You can come in now. She looked at Jess. There's a spot at the end near the kitchen. It's actually quite convenient, easy to slip out if you need to. I didn't answer. I just followed her in with Jess behind me. The dining room was full. Maybe 25 people around a table dressed with linen and those tall candles Cheryl ordered from some boutique in the South End. Everyone looked up when we came in. I saw the flicker of assessment that ran around the room. The sport coat I'd had for 8 years. Jess's navy blouse, perfectly fine by any actual standard. I watched people make their decisions in about 3 seconds. Dennis appeared and steered me toward the Morrison couple near the window. Jess was intercepted by Cheryl, who pointed her toward a chair at the far end of the table, tucked beside the door to the kitchen where the caterer was moving back and forth. Terry Morrison was a large, amiable man who wanted to talk about the Leafs. His wife Sandra was polite in the way that meant she'd already decided I wasn't worth real attention. I answered their questions and kept watching Jess. She sat at the end with her hands in her lap. Dennis's daughter Kira, 17, and she'd learned to perform boredom the same way her mother performed warmth, walked past her twice without speaking. Then Kira leaned to the girl beside her and said something. Both of them looked at Jess. Both of them laughed. Dennis's son Max was 13 and kinder by nature. He went over and talked to Jess for a few minutes about something on his phone, but then Cheryl called him for the family photos around the tree, and he went. The photographer gathered the family. Cheryl in the center, Dennis beside Kira and Max, arranged like they'd done this before, which they had. Beautiful. Intentional. Can we get one with extended family? The photographer offered. Cheryl didn't even pause. This is wonderful, thank you. She didn't look at Jess. Dinner started. Turkey and all the trimmings, served in dishes that probably cost more than my truck payment. Place cards at every setting. I found mine toward the middle. I looked for Jess's name. It was at the very end, right beside the kitchen door. A card that had been placed with the same care as the others but meant something entirely different. I picked up her card and mine, moved us both to 2 open seats in the middle. Dennis appeared at my elbow. Mike, those spots are, for who? The Morrison's son and his girlfriend. They're running late. Then they can have our seats at the end. I sat down. Jess sat beside me. Cheryl materialized. The look she gave me was a degree or two cold. Those seats were placed carefully, then placed them somewhere else. We held each other's eyes. I was tired. I was tired of being managed in small ways by someone who'd decided a long time ago that my daughter didn't fit the picture. Fine. She took the cards. But if Andrew Morrison is offended, you can explain it to Dennis. Dinner went around. Conversations about Cheryl's Elmsdale development, about some renovations someone was doing on a place in Chester Basin, about whether private school in Halifax was worth the commute from Hammonds Plains. I answered when asked and mostly didn't listen. Jess was doing fine. She was talking to the man on her left, an older fellow named George who'd apparently been Dennis's first employer and was refreshingly normal. I started to feel the tension in my shoulders ease a little. Then Kira, from across the table, said it. Are you still at that diner on Gottingen? Isn't that area kind of sketchy? It's fine, Jess said. My friend's cousin got her bike stolen near there. Okay. I just think it's funny. She's doing nursing, but she works at a diner. She said it the way teenagers say things when they're performing for a slightly older audience. Mom always says it's hard to take people seriously when they can't commit to one thing. The table had tilted. People were listening now. The way people listen when they'd rather not be seen to be listening. Dennis looked up. Kira, that's not necessary. What? I'm just asking. Your cousin is in her 3rd year of a highly competitive nursing program, Dennis said. Working while you're in school takes discipline. Cheryl touched his arm. Let's not turn this into a lecture. I'm not lecturing, I'm explaining. Cheryl's voice dropped into something smooth. She only works at the diner because her dad can't fully support her. It's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's just the reality of some situations. Her eyes swept the table gently, the way you'd explain away something unfortunate. The table felt very quiet. I pushed back my chair. It scraped against the hardwood the way chairs do when everyone notices. Can't fully support her, I repeated. Cheryl blinked. I only meant, my daughter earns her own wages because I raised her to understand the value of that, not because I can't provide for her. I'm a licensed civil engineer with 22 years in infrastructure. I chose to raise a daughter who doesn't wait for things to be handed to her. I looked around the table, at the faces turned toward me. I'm proud of that choice. I walked down to where Jess was sitting, put my hands on her shoulders the way I had when she was small and needed to know someone was behind her. My daughter wakes up at 5:30 on clinical placement days. She has sat with patients who were dying and held their hands because that was the compassionate thing to do. She works at a diner on weekends because she pays her own phone bill and her own books and her own car insurance, and she does it without complaint. She spent $40 she earned serving coffee on a bottle of wine she brought here as a gift, and I watched it get opened without a word of thanks. I looked at Cheryl. Your daughter got a car for her 16th birthday and can't look her cousin in the eye across a table. Cheryl stood. This is incredibly inappropriate. What's inappropriate is that my daughter spent 45 minutes in a mudroom because you decided she didn't fit your afternoon. I'd like you to leave. Cheryl's voice was rigid. Gladly. I looked at Dennis, my brother, the man who taught me to skate on the rink behind the community center in Dartmouth when I was 6 years old. You have a choice here. You can get up with us, or you can stay seated. Dennis looked at Cheryl, then at me, then at Jess. He stayed seated. I'm sorry, Mike, he said. You embarrassed her in front of her clients. That's not okay. Something shifted in me. Not broke. I don't know if it was fragile enough to break, just shifted. The way a foundation settles and you feel it in the floors. Okay, I said. I helped Jess up. We got our coats from the mud. I picked up the half-empty bottle of Tidal Bay from the side table by the door. We'd brought it. We'd take it. The caterer's table near the entrance had a display Cheryl had been talking about for weeks apparently. A tiered dessert tower, individual tarts and PT4s arranged on a 4-level chrome stand, the kind you rent from an event company. Professional. Expensive. Cheryl had mentioned it twice in the weeks before. I stopped beside it. "Don't you dare," Cheryl said from across the room. I thought about it. I genuinely thought about it. And then I looked at Jess. She shook her head, just barely. "Not worth it," she said quietly. She was right. She was always right about what was worth it. I left the tower standing. We walked out into the November evening, got in the truck and drove back toward Dartmouth. We didn't talk for the first stretch of highway. The sun was going down over the harbor, that flat pewter light you only get in November in Nova Scotia, and the radio was playing something I didn't register. Finally, Jess said, "I'm sorry you didn't get to eat." I laughed. I couldn't help it. It surprised me and then it surprised her, and then we were both laughing in a way that hurt a little. We stopped at Mary Brown's on the way home, ate in the truck in the parking lot. It was the best meal I'd had in months. That night, I texted Dennis, not angry, just clear. "Jess has been managed and minimized in your house for years." I should have said something sooner. I'm saying it now. He didn't respond. 3 days later, I got a call from Dennis, not a text, which told me something. He didn't address what I'd said. Instead, he told me that Cheryl was upset, that I'd embarrassed her in front of people who mattered professionally, that I owed her an apology. I told him I'd be happy to discuss it once he acknowledged what Jess had been subjected to. He said I was making it about Jess when it was really about my ego. I said I didn't think those two things were true, and I'd talk to him when he was ready to be honest. And I hung up. December came. Jess finished her semester. She called me from campus to tell me her clinical evaluations had come back, and her supervising nurse had written something in the comment section that Jess read to me twice. Her voice doing that thing it does when she's trying not to cry because she's happy. Exceptional patient communication, natural ability to remain calm under pressure. Will be an outstanding nurse. I sat in my kitchen and let myself feel it for a few minutes. Just that. January arrived cold and gray the way January in Nova Scotia always does. I was in my home office reviewing soil reports for a bridge project in Pictou County when Dennis knocked on my door. He didn't call first. He just showed up. I let him in, made coffee. We sat at the kitchen table. He looked tired, older in the way people get when something they were certain of turns out not to be true. "Cheryl and I are separating," he said. I set my mug down. It started coming out over Christmas. He looked at his hands. Andrew Morrison. The son who was late to Thanksgiving. It'd been going on for about a year. All those meetings in the city, the ones I stayed home from, because she said they were client dinners, I'd just be bored. "Dennis," he laughed, short and humorless. She was trying to impress the man she was sleeping with by putting on that whole performance. And I spent the whole day trying to manage you so she could do it. I didn't say anything for a moment. "I'm sorry," I said. "I deserve it." He turned his coffee mug in a slow circle on the table. I knew she was hard on Jess. I told myself Cheryl had high standards, that she was that way with everyone. But I knew it was more than that. I just didn't want to deal with it. Easier to keep things smooth. "Keeping things smooth," I said. "I get that impulse. But the cost of it was sitting on a mudroom bench eating crackers off a TV tray." He put his face in his hands. "God, I know. She's not going to forgive you just because I say so, Dennis. I know that too." He looked up. "I'd like to try. If she'll let me, then you should talk to her yourself. She's on placement Thursday, but she's usually at the diner Saturday mornings. I'm not going to broker it." He nodded, stood up to go, stopped at the door. "She's a good kid, Mike. She's a great kid. You just weren't paying attention." He left. I stood at the window and watched his Audi back down the driveway. Then I went and made fresh coffee and sat with it in the quiet for a while. Dennis did go to the diner on Saturday. I don't know exactly what was said because Jess told me later, and with her usual economy of detail. He showed up, sat at the counter, waited until she was on her break, apologized. She said she listened to the whole thing and then asked him a single question. Did he believe what Cheryl had said about me not being able to fully support her? He said he'd never believed that for a second, and he should have said so at the table. She said she'd think about it. That was enough for now. Jess had always been deliberate about who she let back in. Lynn was like that too, careful with trust. The kind of careful that means when they do let you back, it counts for something. Spring came slowly. It always does on the East Coast. Jess finished her third year and started a summer placement at the QEII Health Sciences Center in Halifax. She texted me on her third day, had her first solo patient handoff, everything went right. She sent a voice note instead of a text because she was walking between wards and her hands were full, and I listened to it 3 times standing next to my truck in a gravel parking lot in New Glasgow. Dennis and I had dinner in April at a place in Dartmouth he knew I liked, a small Portuguese spot that stayed under the radar. He talked about the separation, about the condo he'd rented in Bedford, about the custody arrangement for Kira and Max. He was figuring out who he was without Cheryl organizing his life, and it was disorienting and maybe underneath that something like relief. He asked how Jess was. Really asked, not socially. I told him about the QEII placement. He's listened. I want to make it right with her, he says. Not for my sake. For hers. She deserves a proper family. Then show up the way she needs, not the way that's convenient. He nodded. Didn't argue. He's been doing that. Coming to things. In June, he drove into Halifax for Jess's year-end celebrations, this informal thing her cohort put together at a pub on Barrington Street. He stayed 2 hours, bought a round, asked the right questions, left before he outstayed the moment. Jess texted me on the drive home. Uncle Dennis was actually okay tonight. That's a start, I texted back. I know, she said, but it counts. I think about that Thanksgiving a lot. Not the table, not the tower of tarts I didn't knock over. Jess was right about that. It wouldn't have helped anything. I think about the mudroom, the bench, the 3 crackers on the side plate, the specific smallness of that gesture, how much intention it took to make someone feel that small, and how long Jess had been absorbing it without telling me because she didn't want to cost me my brother. I think about Lynn, about the kind of mother she would have been and the kind she was in the 4 years she had, patient and funny and completely without pretension. She grew up without much and never once seemed embarrassed by it. She would have looked at those 3 crackers on the TV tray and she would have said something that I can't entirely predict, but I know would have been exactly right. Jess has her mother's instinct for what actually matters. Jess registered for her 4th year in the fall. Final year. She's going into emergency nursing. She told me over the phone, matter of fact, while she was apparently stirring something on the stove. Is that what you wanted? I asked. She said she'd been at the QEII during a bad night in July, the kind of shift where everything comes in at once, and at some point around 2 in the morning she'd looked up and realized she wasn't scared. She was exactly where she was supposed to be. That's what I wanted, she said. I couldn't speak for a second. Your mum would be proud, I said finally. I know, she said. I think you both would be. Dennis comes for dinner occasionally now. Nothing formal. He brought a bottle of wine last time, a Tidal Bay, Nova Scotia White Local. He held it up when I answered the door. I thought this might be a good choice, he said. It is, I said. Come in. We ate at the kitchen table. Jess called partway through and I put her on speaker and she talked to Dennis for maybe 3 minutes, comfortable and easy the way things are when trust is being rebuilt carefully, one small thing at a time. After she hung up, Dennis was quiet for a moment. She's something else, he said. I know, I said. She always has been. We finished the wine and the food and I walked him out to his car. The night was clear and cold the way maritime nights get in October, stars visible, breath showing. He paused with his keys in his hand. I keep thinking about the mudroom, he said. I should have gotten up. Yeah, you should have. He nodded, got in his car, drove away. I stood in the driveway for a minute in the cold. The neighborhood was quiet. Just the sound of a dog somewhere, a car 1 street over, the ordinary sounds of the evening settling in around an ordinary house. My daughter was going to be a nurse, a good one. She'd learned that your value doesn't come from where you sit at someone else's table. It comes from what you do when you show up for people who need you. She'd known that for a while, actually. I just finally showed up at the right moment to say it out loud. That's the part I'll carry, not the argument, not the room going quiet, not even leaving with the wine we brought. Just that bench in the mudroom, my daughter leaning into my arm, and me finally saying the thing I should have said long before dinner was ever on the table.